As teachers and parents, what are our goals when it comes to educating our children? Well, we want our students to succeed academically and socially, to be able to think with creativity and rigor, and finally to be healthy and happy. To achieve these results, we'd be willing to do anything to make that happen. But what if I told you there was one activity that met all of these goals and had lifelong benefits for our children? Over 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Plato said, "I would teach children music, physics, and philosophy, but most importantly music, for in the patterns of music and all the arts are the keys of learning." Plato was more correct than he imagined, and there is now hard scientific evidence that music training has a profound and important effect on all learning. The field of neuroscience was revolutionized by the invention of the fMRI imaging technique in 1991. Scientists could now see exactly what was going on inside the brain in real time. And wait until you see what happened when they looked inside the brains of musicians. Now that scientists were able to look inside the brain while music was being listened to, they were really surprised at what they saw. There were a lot more parts of the brain lit up than they expected to see, and when they looked inside the brains of musicians performing on instruments, they were astonished. Nearly every part of the brain was involved. Some neuroscientists started asking, what benefits might we see in the brains of children who learn a musical instrument? What they discovered was exciting evidence that music making is probably the best thing that you can do for your brain and has far-reaching implications for education. Before we go further, what kind of music study are we talking about? Well, first of all, we're talking about instrumental music specifically, and age is critical. 6 to 8 years old is the ideal starting time to begin to learn an instrument. Unfortunately, this is later than most school districts begin their instrumental music programs. Another important point, measurable benefits have only been observed after 2 years of study. But 10 years of study is necessary in order to have benefits that last a lifetime. If you start in 2nd grade and go to 12th grade, that's 10 years. It can happen, and it does happen in the Victor school system. Finally, by musical study, we're talking about taking private lessons or small group lessons and regular daily practice. Really studying an instrument takes some work, but the benefits are absolutely worth it. In 1993, a study was done that suggested that listening to the music of Mozart could make you smarter. This spawned an entire industry of music CDs for children. Unfortunately, there were serious flaws in the research, and the positive effects didn't hold up over time. So the Mozart effect doesn't really exist. We do know that listening to music releases endorphins, which can give us a heightened feeling of excitement. It can lower cortisol levels, which can alleviate stress, and it can also release dopamine and serotonin, which are considered the feel-good hormones, and prolactin, a hormone that can calm and comfort you. However, these are just temporary effects. They don't last forever. Before being able to see inside the brain, scientists assumed that they would see differences in the brains of musicians. Specifically, they thought that they would have brains that were more suited for music making. Turns out that's not true. You only become a musician with hard work. You're made, not born that way. So it's up to you. Now that we've defined what we mean by music study, and we've determined that musicians begin life with brains just like everyone else's, let's look at what happens to the brain when you learn to play an instrument at a young age. Musical study is now known to actually change the structure and functionality of the brain. It positively impacts brain networks that control many academic areas, and it actually can change brain structure of both the white matter, the area that carries signals throughout the brain, and the gray matter, the information processing portion of the brain. In fact, Oliver Sacks, the author of Musicophilia, says, anatomists today would be hard put to identify the brain of a visual artist, a writer, or a mathematician, but they would recognize the brain of a professional musician without a moment's hesitation. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, and trust me, a lot of this information was entirely new to me, but I'll try to give you a quick tour of the parts of the brain that are most affected by music study. The motor and premotor cortices control muscle groups throughout the body, are responsible for complex hand motions, and prepare the body's muscles for movement. The frontal cortex controls emotional expression, problem-solving, memory, language, and judgment. And the auditory cortex is responsible for language processing and interpreting the inflections of sounds. For example, is that person sad or happy? Language and music are linked in many ways. Two elements that they share are rhythm, or timing, and timbre, the quality of the sound being heard. In fact, in studies where young children were asked to match the steady beat of a drum, those children who easily matched the beat showed greater reading skills than those children who could not match the beat. This makes this simple test a reliable predictor of students who will need more support or music lessons. Making sense of sound is one of the most important tasks our brain has, and it's about the hardest thing the brain needs to do. Musicians learn to make sense of sound with a tremendous amount of precision. A study by Dr. Nina Kraus showed that after 2 years of study, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders who took music lessons had stronger language and reading skills, a better ability to hear speech in noisy environments, faster brain development, and their brain response to sound was more accurate than their peers who did not have lessons. In 2012, a longitudinal study was done by the Brain and Creativity Institute at USC in partnership with the LA Philharmonic, involving 60 students from underserved neighborhoods in Los Angeles. For 5 years, neuroscientists have been monitoring brain development and behavior on a group of 20 of these children who were given music lessons on violin. The other 40 peers were divided into 2 groups, one group in a community sports program and another who were not involved in any enrichment program. Here's what they found. The children who were given musical instruction showed changes in thickness and volume of brain regions responsible for sound processing, language development, speech perception, reading skills, and phonological awareness. This study and others have important implications for students who are dealing with socioeconomic deficits, but it also proves the positive effects of music training on language acquisition and reading skills for all children. Music and mathematics are also related, especially in the areas of arithmetic, geometry, and trigonometry. In fact, music study results in better spatial temporal reasoning, short-term memory, visual motor mapping, and logical and abstract reasoning, all important skills for students studying upper-level mathematics and science. In a multi-year study done in British Columbia, Canada, tracking educational records for over 110,000 students, it was found that the students who were highly engaged in instrumental music, beginning in elementary school and continuing through high school, were on average a whole year ahead of their peers in math, English, and science skills. The parts of the brain that control executive function are also positively affected by early instrumental music lessons. What's executive function? These are the mental processes that allow you to focus attention, remember instructions, handle multiple tasks. It helps you control impulses, set and achieve goals, filter out distractions, and prioritize. It helps you to get things done. These are exactly the skills we want our students to develop with social-emotional learning, and music teachers have always understood that this is an area of strength for students who study music. Except now, we know there's an anatomical reason for this. So we know that learning an instrument at a young age strengthens the brains of young children, and that these effects can last a lifetime. We know there's evidence that academic skills are stronger and test scores are higher in English, mathematics, and science, but only if you begin music lessons at a young age and continue to play throughout high school. What is really exciting about the current research being done on musical study and its effect on learning in the brain is that although neuroscientists are finding new information every day, they know that they are only beginning to understand what happens to the brain of a child who studies a musical instrument. However, what we do know certainly seems to support what Dr. Nina Kraus once said. Probably the healthiest thing we can do for our brains is to make music. We know that music stimulates more parts of the brain than any other human function. Imagine what could happen if all children had the advantage of early music lessons. If you'd like to learn more, I'd start with Anita Collins' YouTube video, How Playing an Instrument Benefits Your Brain. Then I'd read This Is Your Brain on Music by Daniel Levitin and Musicophilia, written by Oliver Sacks. You can also watch several wonderful TED Talks by Nina Kraus, including Music and Language, a Brain Partnership. Enjoy, and go on out and advocate for music lessons for your children.